In a world where grocery store shelves seem endless and electricity hums quietly from invisible wires, there exists a different kind of farmer. Not just a grower of tomatoes or a keeper of chickens, but a true architect of freedom. A person who builds their own solar panels from scrap metal, rigs water purification systems from salvaged parts, and turns a patch of untamed land into a self-sufficient paradise. This isn't fantasy. This is the real story of what it means to live off-grid in Canada. And my friends, it's the ultimate declaration of independence. Self-Sufficient Backyard warmly welcomes all of you, fellow seekers of freedom, lovers of the land, and rebels with a cause. Before we dive into blueprints and budgets, let me tell you a story. It's about Michael Reynolds, the legendary architect behind the Earthship movement. Back in the 1970s, while most people were still celebrating the convenience of plastic packaging and disposable culture, Reynolds was combing through trash dumps like they were gold mines. Old tires? He turned them into walls. Empty beer cans? They became bricks. He built homes that not only sheltered people, but powered themselves, grew their own food, and recycled their own waste. He wasn't just building houses, he was building liberty, brick by brick, can by can. But this isn't just about survival. This is about crafting a life that reflects your deepest values. Off-grid living in Canada is a canvas, one where you paint with solar panels, water catchment systems, and permaculture gardens. It's where you design a home that's both sanctuary and statement. Every decision, from the slope of your roof to the depth of your well, speaks to your personal vision of freedom. And here's where the philosophy kicks in. Because if you think off-grid living is just about getting off the grid, you're missing the best part. This is about embodying the highest ideals of libertarianism, not the caricature drawn by academics with agendas, but the sacred core of the philosophy itself. It's about reclaiming your sovereignty, your right to shape your life, your land, and your future without asking permission from bureaucrats who've never dug a garden bed or split a cord of wood. Take Henry David Thoreau, for example. When he retreated to Walden Pond, it wasn't because he hated society. It was because he wanted to strip life down to its essentials, to discover what was truly necessary, what was truly meaningful. I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, he wrote, to front only the essential facts of life and see if I could not learn what it had to teach. Every off-grid homesteader in Canada is writing their own version of Walden, swapping ponds for boreal forests and ink for solar power schematics. And let's not forget the science. The real science, not the corporate-approved, grant-funded, rubber-stamped kind, but the science born from curiosity, from tinkering in sheds and testing ideas in the field. Off-grid living is a playground for practical science. Want to know how to store solar energy when the sun disappears for weeks? Build a thermal mass battery from rocks and dirt. Curious how to purify water without electricity? Study ancient sand filtration systems and modern biochar reactors. This is science liberated. Science that serves the people who need it most. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. That sounds great in theory, but what about reality? What about the cost? What about the legal hoops? Don't worry, we'll get to all that. But right now, I want you to feel something first. I want you to feel the quiet power of standing on your own land, knowing that every watt of power, every bite of food, every drop of water is yours because you made it happen. That feeling, that's what off-grid living in Canada is all about. And make no mistake, this isn't a call to isolate yourself from society. Quite the opposite. This is a call to become the kind of person society desperately needs. A self-reliant, critically thinking, community-building free spirit who can teach others how to live with both independence and integrity. So, welcome once again to Self-Sufficient Backyard, where we're not just talking about off-grid living, we're talking about living free. Stay with me, because this journey is just beginning. Libertarianism, my friends, is not just a political theory tucked away in dusty textbooks. It's the sacred reminder that you, and only you, hold the brush to paint the canvas of your life. It's the ancient truth whispered by Socrates, the fiery declaration of Patrick Henry, and the rebellious pulse that made Rosa Parks refuse to surrender her seat. Libertarianism, in its purest and most divine form, says that no king, No committee, and certainly no bureaucrat, has the right to decide where you live, how you live, or what you do with your own two hands on your own piece of land. And that, my fellow freedom seekers, is where the journey to your off-grid paradise truly begins, choosing the land itself. Now, choosing where to plant your off-grid flag in Canada isn't like picking a campsite for the weekend. This decision is going to shape your destiny. It's the difference between living free and living frustrated. You're not just buying dirt, you're claiming sovereignty. And the very first step to living as a true off-grid libertarian is understanding that land, my friends, is the original currency of freedom. Let me tell you about someone who understood this better than most, Thomas Jefferson. This man didn't just believe in freedom. He believed freedom started with owning land, working it with your own hands, and never letting some crown or government confiscate the fruits of your labor. The small landowners are the most precious part of a state, he said, and every off-gridder in Canada today is living proof of that wisdom. But here's the trick. Not all land is created equal. Some plots will liberate you. Others will chain you to endless headaches. First, there's accessibility. Unless you're planning to teleport your solar panels and septic tanks onto your property, you need to think about how you'll get materials in and produce out. The perfect off-grid homestead balances isolation with access. Remote enough to keep out nosy regulators, but close enough that a busted water pump doesn't require a 300-mile dog sled expedition. Then, of course, there's the legal landscape, the invisible minefield between you and your freedom. In a perfect libertarian world, you could build your earthship, plant your food forest, and distill your rainwater without filling out a single form. But here in the real world, some municipalities see off-gridders as renegades, and they'll fight tooth and nail to keep you tied to the grid. That's why knowing the local bylaws, zoning restrictions, and building codes is as essential as knowing how to start a fire in a snowstorm. This isn't about asking permission. This is about knowing where the battle lines are drawn. Now let me sprinkle a little humor on this heavy dish. Choosing your off-grid location is a lot like dating in your 30s. You can't just fall for the first pretty face. You need to ask the tough questions. Do you come with access to year-round water? How do you handle windstorms? Are you open to solar arrays and composting toilets? Because trust me, a gorgeous sunset view means nothing if you have to hike 5 kilometers every time you need to haul drinking water back to your cabin. And this, my friends, is why location selection isn't just a real estate decision. It's a philosophical declaration. It's you standing on a patch of earth and saying, this is where I reclaim my autonomy. This is where I break free from the matrix of mortgage payments, property taxes, and grocery bills. This is where I live by the sweat of my brow and the power of my mind. It's an act of faith. Faith in yourself, faith in nature, and faith in the idea that human beings were meant to be free. So if you're sitting there right now, dreaming of your off-grid future, wondering where to begin with the land. Walk it, breathe it, listen to it. Choose a place that speaks to your soul, but also makes sense for your survival. And remember, this isn't just about where you'll live. This is about the legacy you're building, the story you'll tell your grandchildren about how you took control of your life and built a kingdom where no king could rule over you. Before we dive into building power systems, water supplies, and food forests, I've got one simple request. If you believe that freedom begins with self-sufficiency,